Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show where we take your source material and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight, giving you a shortcut to being truly well-informed.
And today, the source material you've brought us is, well, it's definitely something.
It is. We're looking at William Guy Carr's Pawns in the Game, specifically the FBI edition from Dauphin Publications. And it presents this idea, this narrative of a hidden force shaping history.
That's putting it mildly. This isn't just a book. It's this really profound assertion of a continuous, ancient conspiracy, something that Carr claims has been pulling the strings throughout human history, orchestrating major events.
So our mission today.
Our mission in this deep dive is to really explore the claims within this text. We need to understand Carr's pretty intricate narrative of global manipulation.
And importantly, we're navigating this by just impartially conveying the ideas in the source material. We're focusing purely on what Carr asserts, what he presents as factual.
Exactly. We're not endorsing these viewpoints. It's purely about understanding the worldview he lays out for us, the narrative he constructs.
Okay, let's unpack this. Carr starts big. I mean, really big. Not just human history, but cosmic struggle. What exactly is this world revolutionary movement he describes? Where does he say it comes from?
Right. He frames history itself as this continuous battle between good and evil. And he traces its origins way back to what he calls a heavenly revolution.
Heavenly revolution.
Yeah. He actually states, quite bluntly, that the Old Testament is simply the history of how Satan became prince of the world, and that Satan then established something Carr calls the Synagogue of Satan right here on Earth.
Okay. And the purpose of this Synagogue of Satan?
According to Carr, its specific purpose was to prevent God's divine plan for universal rule from ever being implemented. He asserts that Christ actually came to Earth precisely because this conspiracy had reached a point where Satan had allegedly gained control over, quote, all those in high places.
Wow. So he connects it directly to figures in the Bible.
Directly. He claims Christ identified certain people, those who called themselves Jews, but, according to Carr citing Revelation, were not and lied as belonging to this Synagogue of Satan.
And he names specific groups from that era.
He does. He points to the money changers, who he explicitly identifies as bankers, along with the scribes and Pharisees. Carr basically labels them the Illuminati of his day.
So he's drawing a direct line from ancient times to this concept of the Illuminati.
Exactly, linking them all to this ancient, ongoing conspiracy against what he sees as God's divine plan.
So it's fundamentally a theological battle playing out on Earth. Did Carr argue there was a way to fight back? A solution offered?
Yes, absolutely. Carr argues that Christ's whole purpose was to release humanity from these alleged bonds of Satan. He claims Christ gave humanity the solution: go out and teach the truth about this conspiracy to everyone, all nations.
He references specific scripture for this.
He does. He points to John chapter 8 about knowing the truth and Matthew 28, the Great Commission. But here's Carr's stark conclusion: that the Luciferian conspiracy, as he calls it, is now in its semi-final stage. And the reason? Because humanity, in his view, has failed to carry out that mandate from Christ.
Failed to spread the truth about the conspiracy.
That's his assertion. And central to this is how he thinks thoughts, especially evil influences, spread. He posits that thoughts, good or evil, originate from a cause and are transmitted to the human brain, which he calls a mysterious receiving set.
Like radio waves.
Kind of. He draws that exact analogy. If humans can broadcast messages using radio and TV, why couldn't celestial beings do the same? This is how he explains the devil, as he puts it, inoculating minds with atheistic materialism.
So it's psychological warfare on a cosmic scale.
That's precisely how Carr frames it. This isn't just abstract. It manifests directly in the physical world, through human actions, societal changes, influencing minds globally.
It's an incredibly provocative framework to start with. But how does he bring this down to earth? Does he identify a specific human organization as this Synagogue of Satan?
He absolutely does. Carr claims that in 1784, something he calls an act of God revealed the existence of this continuing Luciferian conspiracy to the government in Bavaria.
Okay, and who is at the center of this earthly group?
A figure named Adam Weishaupt. Carr describes him as a Jesuit-trained professor who supposedly defected from Christianity and embraced this Luciferian ideology.
And his role?
Carr alleges that around 1770, the moneylenders, And he specifically says they had recently organized the House of Rothschild, retained Weishaupt.
Retained him for what purpose?
To revise and modernize, as Carr puts it, these age-old protocols. Protocols designed for achieving ultimate world domination and imposing what Carr terms a satanic despotism.
And Weishaupt completed this task.
According to Carr, yes, on May 1st, 1776.
May Day. That date is significant in revolutionary history. So the Illuminati emerges from this. What was their core plan, according to Carr?
The absolute core, as Carr details it, was the destruction of all existing governments and religions, a huge goal.
How did they supposedly plan to achieve that?
By division. Systematically dividing the masses, who Carr says Weishaupt called goyim, meaning human cattle, into opposing camps.
On what basis?
Political, racial, social, economic, you name it, creating more and more opposing sides, then arming them, providing an incident, something to make them fight each other, weaken themselves, and ultimately destroy their own national governments and religious institutions from within.
And Weishaupt organized a group for this.
Yes, in 1776, he organized the Illuminati. Carr claims the name comes from Lucifer, meaning holders of the light. He supposedly recruited about 2,000 followers, intelligent people from arts, science, finance, industry.
Where did they operate?
In secret headquarters called Lodges of the Grand Orient. Carr says they presented themselves outwardly as aiming for a benevolent dictatorship, for the good of humanity. Like, guys!
It's an incredibly detailed picture of a hidden structure. How does Carr claim they kept this secret, with supposedly thousands involved over time?
Infiltration is key to his argument, especially infiltration of Freemasonry. Carr claims only Masons who proved themselves internationalists and had, in his words, defected from God, were initiated into the Illuminati. This let them use the cover of philanthropy for their revolutionary activities.
Did he give examples of this infiltration?
He mentions John Robison, a high-degree Scottish Rite Mason and professor. Carr alleges the Illuminists invited him to Europe specifically to help infiltrate Masonic lodges back in Britain.
But Robison didn't go along with it.
According to Carr, no. Robison supposedly saw through the benevolent dictatorship guys and realized the true goal. He later published a book in 1798 called Proof of a Conspiracy to Destroy All Governments and Religions. A warning, Carr says, mostly went unheeded.
What about America? Does Carr connect this to the founding of the U.S.?
He certainly does. He states that Thomas Jefferson became a student and a strong defender of Weishaupt. Carr alleges Jefferson actively infiltrated the Illuminati into the new Scottish Rite Lodges in New England.
Were there warnings about this in America, according to Carr?
Yes, he cites a few figures. David Papin, then president of Harvard, apparently warned his graduating class in 1798 about Illuminism's influence on American politics and religion.
I knew.
John Quincy Adams. Carr claims Adams, who organized the New England Masonic lodges himself, wrote letters in 1800 exposing Jefferson's alleged use of Masonic lodges for subversive purposes. Carr even says these letters helped Adams win the presidency and are supposedly in a library in Philadelphia.
So these early exposures, did they have any effect?
Carr claims there was a general disapproval and disgust over some incident in 1829 that caused nearly 40% of Masons in the northern U.S. jurisdiction to secede. But, he argues, the fact that these events are suppressed in schools shows the power of the conspirators.
And he mentions another development around that time, 1829.
Yes, he points to a meeting in New York where a British Illuminist named Wright supposedly told attendees that the Illuminati planned to unite nihilist and atheist groups into something called Communism.
Communism, as a tool for future wars.
Exactly. To foment future wars and revolutions. Carr claims figures like Clinton Roosevelt and Horace Greeley raised funds that financed Karl Marx and Engels to write Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto.
Financed by the Illuminati.
That's Carr's assertion. And here's a key part of his argument. While Marx was writing the Communist Manifesto under one Illuminati group's direction,
yes,
Professor Karl Ritter of Frankfurt University was supposedly writing its antithesis, Nazism, under the direction of another Illuminati group.
Wait, both communism and Nazism, created by the same overarching conspiracy?
According to Carr, yes. Designed specifically to divide humanity into opposing camps, arm them, and make them destroy each other along with their institutions. He says Ritter's work was continued by Nietzsche.
So the conclusion is, what?
Carr concludes that millions upon millions of people have just been used as pawns in the game by the leaders of these two atheistic totalitarian groups, essentially the Illuminati using communism and Nazism, playing this giant game of international chess for undisputed control over the world, its wealth, its natural resources, its manpower, and its religion.
So Carr argues this isn't just philosophy or ideology. It directly drives historical events.
Yeah.
How does he connect this Illuminati plan to actual revolutions and wars?
Well, he makes this really sweeping claim that the international bankers of today, like the money changers of Christ's day, are only tools or agents of the Illuminati.
Just agents.
Yes. And he claims there's documentary evidence proving that these internationalist capitalists, working through their big banking houses, have financed both sides in every single war and revolution since 1776.
Both sides. Every time.
That's his assertion. He brings up that 1829 meeting in New York again, where the plan to unite nihilists and atheists into communism was supposedly revealed.
Not financed by figures like Roosevelt and Greeley.
While Marx wrote Das Kapital in the Manifesto, but simultaneously Carr insists Professor Karl Ritter was writing the antithesis, Nazism, directed by another Illuminati faction.
The deliberate creation of opposites to cause conflict.
Exactly. To divide humanity, arm them, make them fight and destroy each other and their political and religious structures. He notes Ritter's work was continued by Nietzsche.
And Nazism specifically. What was its purpose in this plan, according to Carr?
Ritter, as Carr interprets him, advised Aryan leaders to organize Nazism and use fascism, or National Socialism, as their playbook for world conquest. He specifically recommended using anti-Semitism as a tool.
Why anti-Semitism?
To counter the claim that the Semitic race were God's chosen people. Ritter's plan, Carr says, included subjugating Europe through military and economic wars, making sure Germany always recovered faster.
And Ritter recommended.
Carr emphasizes Ritter's chilling recommendation for the total destruction of communism and the extermination of the Jewish race.
The justification, allegedly, was that communism was being used by international Jewish bankers for their own materialistic goals.
So it's layers upon layers of manipulation in Carr's view. Precisely. Carr concludes that millions are just pawns in the game, manipulated by the leaders of these two atheistic groups, the Illuminati using communism and Nazism, playing international chess for total global control, wealth, resources, people, even religion.
Okay, let's get specific. You mentioned Carr uses historical examples. What does he claim happened during the English Revolution?
Carr alleges that the Jewish money barons operating from France, Holland, Germany decided it would be poetic justice to test their revolutionary techniques in England first.
As revenge.
Revenge for King Edward III expelling Jews centuries before. Their tactics, Carr claims, involve using underground agents or cells to stir up trouble.
Trouble between who?
Between the king and government, employers and labor, ruling class and workers, church and state, deliberately injecting controversy into politics and religion to divide people, Catholics versus Protestants, then Protestants versus other Protestants.
And Oliver Cromwell fits into this how?
Carr claims Cromwell was essentially working with these money barons. He cites Lord Alfred Douglas, who supposedly found missing records from a synagogue in Moulmein containing letters.
Incriminating letters.
Yes. One dated June 16, 1647, allegedly from Cromwell, OC, to an Ebenezer Pret. It supposedly says Cromwell will advocate for admitting Jews to England in return for money, but only if King Charles III is removed. He even advises assassination, but says he won't arrange it, though he'd help Charles escape.
An escape plan.
And Pratt's reply, Carr claims, dated July 12th, promises the money once Charles is gone and Jews are admitted. It suggests assassination is too risky, and that letting Charles escape and then recapturing him would make a trial and execution possible.
So Carr is alleging the entire lead-up to Charles I's execution was a setup orchestrated by Cromwell and these financiers.
Exactly. Carr asserts Cromwell did arrange Charles's escape in November 1647, only for him to be recaptured, something other historians also questioned. Then Cromwell purged Parliament of Loyalists, creating the Rump Parliament of just 50 members who seized power.
And they put the king on trial.
A high court of justice was proclaimed. 2/3 of its members were levelers from Cromwell's army. Carr makes a point that no English lawyer would draw up the indictment. So an alien Jew, Isaac Dorislaus, supposedly an agent for Manasseh ben Israel, did it.
And the verdict.
Charles is found guilty. But Carr insists it wasn't by the English people, but by the international Jewish moneylenders. He was publicly beheaded January 30th, 1649.
What were the consequences, according to Carr?
He says the moneylenders got their revenge and crucially gained control over England's economy and government. This then led to another key part of their plan,
Which was?
the creation of the Bank of England in 1694. Carr claims the negotiations for a big loan to King William of Orange happened in secret, the lenders' identities hidden.
What were the terms of this loan?
Secrecy for the lenders, a charter for the bank, the right to establish the gold standard, meaning they could loan out £10 for every £1 of gold they held, consolidation of the national debt, and payment secured by direct taxation.
Carr's interpretation of this.
He says King William basically sold the people of England into economic bondage. The bankers got the power to issue and control currency and cared not who made the laws. He even claims these secret powers orchestrated Monmouth's rebellion and the bloody assizes to eliminate opposition.
That's quite a narrative for England. How does he claim this pattern continued with the French Revolution?
Carr argues that the international Jewish moneylenders, or their successors, plotted, planned, and financed the French Revolution of 1789 in exactly the same way they did the English one.
The exact same blueprint.
Yes. And he makes this huge claim that the descendants of these same international Jewish financiers have been the secret power behind every war and revolution from 1789 onwards.
Wow. Does he name names again?
He focuses on the Rothschilds. Amschel Mayer Bauer, or Rothschild, trained his 5 sons, especially Nathan, to become captains of high finance. Nathan's goal was controlling the Bank of England and creating an international banking monopoly in Europe. Their combined wealth, Carr says, was meant to fulfill the secret ambitions their father revealed.
And these ambitions were laid out somewhere.
Carr devotes a lot of space to describing a supposed secret meeting in 1773 where Rothschild allegedly unveiled a 25-point plan.
A 25-point plan for what?
For ultimate, undisputed control of the wealth, natural resources, and manpower of the entire world. Carr outlines the core strategies.
Which sound like?
Basically, economic enslavement through monopolies and engineered crashes, political subversion by dividing people, controlling administration, manipulating media, and deliberate moral corruption to weaken society. He presents these as specific applied tactics.
Can you give some examples from this alleged plan? It sounds incredibly cynical.
Extremely cynical, according to Carr. Points like government using violence and terrorism, law is just force in disguise, preach liberalism to grab political power because people will give up power for an idea, use freedom to start class wars, knowing capital, which they control, will be essential to whoever wins.
What about the moral corruption part?
Systematic use of alcoholic liquors, drugs, moral corruption, and all forms of vice spread by agenters, spies, blackmailers, even society figures to corrupt the youth. No stopping at bribery, deceit, and treachery, asserting the right to seize property by any means, using terror via death sentences for blind submission.
And slogans like liberty, equality, fraternity.
Carr claims those were just tools to control legions and establish an aristocracy of money replacing the old one. They'd control administration by picking servile and obedient candidates advised by their own trained geniuses.
Control the media, too.
Total control of public information while they remain in the shade, blameless. He quotes a chilling line allegedly from the plan. Thanks to the press, we have got gold in our hands. Each victim on our side is worth 1,000 goyim.
It covers everything. War, diplomacy.
Detailed plans for revolutionary war, street fighting, the pattern for the reign of terror as the most economical way to subdue people quickly, insistence on secret diplomacy after wars so their agents can implement mandates without revealing the secret power.
And the economic strategy.
Establishing huge monopolies to control even the biggest non-conspirator fortunes. Economic war via high taxes, unfair competition, controlling raw materials, inciting worker demands for higher pay, which won't actually benefit them, and subsidizing competitors to ruin others.
Armaments.
Building up armaments so the goyim destroy each other, leaving only the proletariat, a few loyal millionaires, and enough police and soldiers to protect the conspirators' interests.
The end goal.
The new order, a one-world government, a dictator appointing members. Capturing youth by infiltrating society and teaching false theories, twisting laws into contradictions to destroy civilization, replacing law with arbitration.
That's a terrifyingly comprehensive blueprint. How does Carr then connect this directly to the French Revolution's events?
He alleges the Jewish Illuminati under Moses Mendelssohn infiltrated continental Freemasonry using Weishaupt and the Grand Orient Lodges, setting up secret revolutionary committees.
And specific figures.
People like Mirabeau. Carr says he was heavily in debt, initiated into Illuminism, and then maneuvered into compromising situations that became public, the l'infamie or character assassination method, to force him into the revolutionary cause. Carr claims Mirabeau later regretted it, tried to save Louis XVI, and was poisoned.
Others involved.
Mirabeau allegedly persuaded the Duc d'Orleans to merge Masonic groups and led him into debt. Joseph Balsamo, or Cagliostro, supposedly turned one of the Duke's properties into a revolutionary printing press and ran a spy rings for l'infamie.
What about Marie Antoinette?
Carr claims Balsamo's propagandists deliberately painted a false, negative picture of her to incite the mob. He also says they orchestrated the diamond necklace affair to slander both the church and the state.
And the financial side?
M. Necker, appointed by these financiers, according to Carr, massively increased France's national debt, forcing the government to seek huge loans and accept the bankers' terms.
Who led the Reign of Terror, in Carr's view?
Agents organized Robespierre, Danton, and Marat. They met in the Jacobean convent, planned mass murders, compiled lists of reactionaries. Carr claims criminals and lunatics were released to incite terror, while underground workers rounded up key figures.
What about Napoleon after the Revolution?
Carr alleges that once Napoleon became emperor, Nathan Rothschild and his brothers became the real kings of finance in Europe, the secret power behind the newly established thrones.
Where did they operate from?
Headquarters in neutral Geneva, Switzerland. From there, they allegedly set up international cartels to profit from wars, no matter who fought who or who won and who lost, controlling munitions, shipbuilding, mining, chemicals, steel.
And Napoleon's downfall.
Carr claims Napoleon publicly denounced them, and that sealed his fate. His invasion of Russia failed, not because of winter, but due to alleged sabotaging of his lines of communications, cutting off supplies.
What about Waterloo?
Carr tells the famous story. Nathan Rothschild in Paris supposedly got early news of the battle via carrier pigeon. He allegedly sent false info to London that Wellington had lost, crashing the market.
So you could buy low.
Exactly. Once Wellington's actual victory was confirmed, Nathan supposedly bought up tons of undervalued assets, then revealed the truth, making a fortune. Then he loaned huge sums to England and Prussia for war repairs. By his death, Carr says, Nathan controlled the Bank of England and its massive debt.
So this web of financial leverage, political subversion, orchestrated chaos. How did Carr claim it impacted the founding of America and its financial system?
Carr flatly states the international moneylenders urged and financed the American Colonial War, 1775-1783. He points back to 1764, claiming Amschel Mayer Rothschild, via the Bank of England, got laws passed stopping colonial officials from issuing their own money.
Forcing them to borrow.
Yes, forcing them to borrow from banks. Carr quotes Benjamin Franklin saying this killed prosperity and caused a depression, cutting circulating money in half.
And the war itself.
Yeah.
How did they profit?
Carr says the Rothschilds profited by supplying the British with Hessian mercenaries to fight the colonists. He argues the only real losers were the British people, whose national debt ballooned, which, Carr adds, was part of the long-term plan to dissolve the British Empire.
What about after independence? How did they gain control in the U.S., according to Carr?
He points to Alexander Hamilton, calling him a hireling of the Bank of England. In 1780, Hamilton proposed a federal bank owned by private interests, not the government.
Who would fund it?
It was capitalized for $12 million, and Carr alleges the Bank of England provided $10 million of that. In 1783, Hamilton and Robert Morris organized the Bank of America. Carr claims Morris, as financial superintendent, deliberately bankrupted the U.S. Treasury by the war's end, a typical tactic, he said.
And Hamilton became Treasury Secretary.
Yes, after Franklin died in 1790. Carr says the agents of the international moneylenders got him appointed. Hamilton then chartered the bank, taking the right to issue currency away from the government and basing it on debt.
What was the justification given?
Carr says the public was told government money would be worthless internationally, while banker-issued money would be accepted. He argues this just made the public prey to exploitation.
Carr also mentioned manufactured depressions.
Yes. He described a cycle: encourage investment, let people get heavily mortgaged, then suddenly tighten up credits, recall outstanding loans, and reduce the amount of money in circulation.
Creating an artificial crash.
Exactly. Allowing the money barons to scoop up property and securities for pennies on the dollar, all legally through foreclosures.
Did anyone oppose this?
Andrew Jackson, strongly. Carr quotes Jackson questioning Congress delegating money-issuing power. Jackson's opposition worried the bankers about the bank's charter renewal in 1811.
So they prepared.
Amschel Mayor Rothschild had supposedly secured control of the Bank of England. His son Nathan, now in charge, issued an ultimatum to the U.S. Either the application for renewal of the charter is granted, or the United States will find itself involved in a most disastrous war.
Implying they caused the War of 1812. And what about the Civil War?
Carr claims the Civil War was fundamentally an economic war brought about by the international bankers. He alleges they gave unlimited credit to the South, even offered Napoleon III Texas and Louisiana if France intervened, while charging the North exorbitant interest like 28%.
Prolonging the war for profit.
Carr suggests exactly that, saying it ended only when the bankers considered it time. He offers as evidence a supposed letter from Rothschild brothers discussing profits from the National Banking Act.
What did that act do?
Carr says it was formulated by British bankers and gave national banks almost complete control of the national finance. He details how banks could buy government bonds at a discount, earn high interest on them in gold, and receive currency from the government at low interest to loan out at much higher rates.
Huge profits.
Carr calculates their effective earnings at 28–33%. Crucially, banks could increase and contract their currency at will, allowing them, by acting together, to cause money shortages and depress prices nationwide.
Did anyone recognize the danger?
Carr quotes Lincoln's Treasury Secretary, Salmon P. Chase, calling the act the greatest financial mistake of my life, and warning it built a monopoly affecting everything. Carr states that subsequent bank withdrawals drastically reduced currency per capita, causing massive business failures and losses, enriching the bankers. He claims later depressions were created by similar financial manipulations.
Turning to Russia now, how does Carr explain the origins and leadership of the Russian Revolution using this same framework?
Carr argues the revolution was fomented by the international bankers. Two main goals: overthrow the czars to get undisputed control of the Russian Empire, and remove the crowned heads of Europe generally, which was necessary for their totalitarian plans.
Where does he start the story?
With the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1981, Carr notes this happened after the Tsar had tried to improve conditions for peasants and Jews. The assassination, he says, led to the harsh May laws against Jews.
And the bankers reacted.
When a delegation led by Baron Ginsburg failed to get the May laws repealed in 1882, Carr claims the international bankers imposed economic sanctions and an embargo, nearly bankrupting Russia. Then, in 1904, they allegedly maneuvered Russia into the disastrous war with Japan.
How did they influence that war?
Carr claims the English Rothschilds refused financial aid to Russia, while Kuhn Loeb & Co. in New York financed Japan. They allegedly ensured Russia's defeat by cutting support at critical moments and sabotaging supplies.
What about Bloody Sunday, 1905?
Carr asserts it wasn't spontaneous. He claims it was planned by a terrorist group. Jewish-led Mensheviks, he specifies, to provoke outrage against the Tsar. He alleges an officer deliberately ordered troops to fire on a peaceful march, killing hundreds, providing the spark for revolution and radicalizing thousands of workers.
After that failed attempt, who did the bankers back, according to Carr?
Lenin. Carr claims the international bankers chose him as their top-level agent in Russia. Lenin studied the French Revolution, realized the secret power was still active, and threw in his lot with them.
What was Lenin's role?
He organized the Comintern, the Central Revolutionary Planning Committee, supposedly to further the bankers' long-range plans, while letting its members think they were the brains. Trotsky, Carr adds, was another key figure serving the same purpose.
And who funded them?
Carr is explicit. British, French, German, and American international bankers, who he constantly reiterates are just tools or agents of the Illuminati.
So, in Carr's view, Lenin and Trotsky were essentially pawns themselves.
Yeah.
How did this lead to the October 1917 revolution?
Carr portrays it as a calculated move. After the July days unrest failed, Kerensky, whom Carr calls a Jewish Napoleon, briefly took power but couldn't rally support. Lenin, acting for the secret powers, then emerged, unified revolutionary groups, and formed the Communist Party.
What about Stalin?
Carr claims Stalin was elected to the party presidium not because he was important then, but because Lenin planned to use him later to supersede others. On November 7, 1917, Lenin seized St. Petersburg.
Who took control of the economy?
A man named Sverdlov, described by Carr as a Jew, a specially trained financial expert and agent of the bankers, quickly took over from Kamenev and assumed absolute control of the Russian economy.
Then came the terror.
Yes. Carr states Lenin turned on terrorism at full blast. Night raids, mass shootings, torture, mutilation, rape, burning. millions dead, millions more in forced labor camps.
And Stalin's role in the purges later, Carr has a specific cynical take on that, doesn't he?
He does. It's one of his most striking claims. He says Stalin, a Gentile, was chosen by the international moneylenders specifically to liquidate hundreds of thousands of Russian Jews in the purges.
Why? What was the alleged purpose?
To counter the growing perception that the bankers were only financing international Jewry. By having Stalin purge Jews, they could demonstrate, Carr argues, that the international bankers don't consider the masses of the people of any race, color, or creed as other than expendable pawns in the game. It highlights, for Carr, the absolute ruthlessness of the conspiracy's directors.
It's fascinating, in a dark way, how Carr connects all these threads. He doesn't stop at national revolutions, does he? He expands this to the world wars. How does he frame WWI and WWII?
He argues the Federal Reserve System, set up in 1913 and controlled, he says, by affiliated bankers in America and Europe, was the key mechanism. It positioned them perfectly to bring about and control World War I.
And the purpose of WWI, in his view.
Specifically to enable the international conspirators to bring about the Russian Revolution in 1917, and of course, profit. Carr claims the Fed made billions from WWI and WWII assets growing, he says, from $5 billion in 1940 to $45 billion in 1946 from WWII alone.
How does he claim WWI was orchestrated?
He points to a supposed meeting in Switzerland in 1912. Leaders of the World Revolutionary Movement and continental Freemasonry allegedly met and decided to assassinate Archduke Francis Ferdinand to start the war. He cites a high Swiss Freemason supposedly saying in September 1912, "The Archduke is condemned. He will die on the steps of the throne," implying it was planned. During the war, Carr says the international capitalists, directed by the Illuminati, just agitated and blamed governments while staying hidden and unharmed.
You mentioned sabotaging Russia.
Yes. Carr claims Britain deliberately held back munitions from Russia in 1915 to create the conditions for revolution. He offers a letter from Professor Bernard Pears to Lloyd George as evidence, stating no supplies had reached Russia from England. He links this to Vickers Maxim and Company, claiming it was controlled by Sir Ernest Cassels, an affiliate of Kuhn Loeb.
What about America entering WWI? How does Carr explain that?
He alleges the British government sent Arthur James Balfour to the U.S. in April 1917. The deal, supposedly, was Britain endorsing political Zionism in exchange for America joining the war. Carr suggests the sinking of the Lusitania was likely the manufactured incident used to justify this shift.
Carr also describes methods of control and propaganda during the war. Something about a glass club.
Right. He describes this luxurious secret club set up in London during WWI. High-ranking people were invited, sworn to secrecy. Inside, they'd meet masked society women. Carr recounts a story of a very high personage and his wife accidentally meeting each other there.
And purpose.
Blackmail. Every employee was a spy, reporting details, affairs, vices, finances recorded in the Black Book. Carr claims 3 army officers involved were later killed in action. An Australian woman and her chauffeur jailed, an MP forced out of public life. He even suggests Lord Kitchener's death on HMS Hampshire in 1916 might have been sabotaged to stop him reorganizing the Russian forces.
Moving to WWII, how did Carr see that being engineered?
He claims WWII was engineered by the Illuminati using various anti-movements, anti-communism, anti-fascism, anti-Semitism. He portrays Hitler initially as someone who opposed the international bankers.
Hitler opposed them. How?
By advocating monetary reform, government issuing money, not debt-based currency, and by challenging the Bank of International Settlements, which Hitler apparently saw as a plan for world control and financial slavery.
Did Hitler try to avoid war, according to Carr?
Carr claims Hitler sought an alliance with Britain in 1936, even offering to give up colonies and sea power. But this was supposedly blocked by the control the international bankers had over British foreign policy. This failure, Carr argues, pushed Hitler into aligning with the extreme Nazi warlords who wanted to destroy the financiers and communism first.
And Churchill's role in Carr's narrative.
Carr alleges Churchill, before becoming prime minister in 1940, deliberately sabotaged British naval readiness, citing things like obsolete anti-submarine gear, and orchestrated the failed Norway gamble.
Why?
To blame Chamberlain, get himself into power, and turn the phony war into a real shooting war. Once PM, Carr claims Churchill used the old Regulation 18B law to arrest hundreds of prominent Britons who opposed war with Germany, people like Captain Ramsay and Admiral Domville.
Arrested without trial.
Without charge or trial, Carr says, bypassing habeas corpus and Magna Carta based on flimsy claims of disloyalty. He asserts these arrests followed a smear campaign against those publicly linking the war plot to international Jewish bankers, like a Mrs. Nicholson, who was acquitted by a jury but then rearrested under 18b.
What about Stalin and the pact with Hitler?
Carr sees the 1939 Stalin-Hitler pact, and then Churchill and Roosevelt giving unlimited aid to Stalin after Hitler attacked Russia in 1941, as all part of the Illuminati plan.
What plan was that?
To divide the world, weaken both sides in a massive conflict while the bankers made hundreds of millions. This, Carr concludes, set the stage for the post-war conferences at Tehran, Yalta, and Potsdam, which reshaped the world according to the conspirators' design.
Carr also focuses heavily on the Spanish Civil War, doesn't he, as a kind of modern blueprint?
Yes, he presents it as a key case study. He claims the long-range plan for Spain started way back, soon after the death of Christ, with moneylenders infiltrating the church, leading eventually to the Inquisition as a reaction. After 1600, he alleges, agents infiltrated the Spanish treasury to wreck the economy and prepare for revolution.
And he outlines specific steps for revolution based on Spain.
He does. A three-step process, he says, applies everywhere.
Agents get into government, civil service, military labor unions, ready to destroy from within.
The Revolutionary Party, anarchists, Marxists, etc., allies with socialist or liberal groups to overthrow the existing government. Third, subversive activities. Create anarchy to discredit the coalition government, providing the excuse to establish a proletarian dictatorship, which is then purged into a totalitarian one, like he claims happened in Russia.
So, a structured takeover. How did this play out in Spain, according to Carr?
He traces it back to Marx's agents organizing Spain's first general strike in 1865. Then Finelli, Marx's associate, affiliated anarchists and Marxists, using Grand Orient lodges as HQs. This led to the First Spanish Republic in 1873.
Then things stabilized for a while.
Until 1923, when chaos from labor strife led King Alfonso III to ask General Franco Primo de Rivera to become military dictator. Carr says Franco restored order and brought reforms, but the 1936 election...
What happened then, according to Carr?
He quotes President Zamora calling it a most completely dishonest election. The Popular Front gained power through what Zamora called an absurd, unfair electoral system, followed by committee fixing of results, even disqualifying rightist candidates.
And after the Popular Front won.
Carr highlights open calls for violent revolution. He quotes communist leader Margarita Nelkin demanding flames that will be seen throughout the planet and waves of blood that will redden the seas. He says Spanish socialists were drifting towards communism, believing in violence.
He talks a lot about subverting youth, too, right?
Extensively. He uses Francisco Freire's letter about his modern schools being fronts for anarchists, aiming to implant the idea of violent upheaval in the minds of the young, teaching them about bombs and poison for use against police and clergy.
What methods did they use?
Encouraging rebellion against parents, old-fashioned, victims of reactionary teachings, ridiculing religion, opium of the people, slandering clergy, portraying Christ as illegitimate, apostles as accomplices, promoting licentiousness. Do as you like, only sins are disobedience betrayal.
And how were they recruited into action?
Leading antisocial youth into conflict with police via gangs, petty crime, then into the communist organized underworld, desensitizing them with things like crime and sex comics, violent movies, even children's specials showing real war footage, pornography.
And the most hardened went where?
To Moscow, Carr claims, for training in revolutionary warfare and the art of street fighting.
Then came the actual terror in Spain.
Yes. Carr claims revolutionary leaders placed cells in key positions in jails and asylums to release antisocial elements and the criminally insane to act as shock troops, whipping up mob violence for quick submission.
Coordinated from Moscow.
He alleges Moscow agents like Rosenberg and Dimitrov flooded Madrid, organizing purification squads to liquidate reactionaries, using lists from spies, concierges, postal workers, even knife grinders. He quotes Stalin, "It is better than 100 innocent people die than one reactionary should escape."
He describes specific atrocities.
Gruesome details. Murdering nuns, drilling holes in a priest, and impaling him with a crucifix, dismembering a motorist. Dimitrov allegedly said after destroying churches, "We are out to create a new world." Carr cites estimates of 50,000 liquidated in Barcelona, 30,000 in Valencia, 10% of Madrid's population.
How did Carr justify including such graphic details?
He quotes Lenin, "There are no morals in politics. There is only expediency. A scoundrel may be of use to us just because he is a scoundrel." Lenin supposedly encouraged experimental attacks, bank robberies, bombing police stations, killing traitors even if they led to excesses. Carr also mentions communist hardening examples, like a party member squandering funds in a brothel only being scandalous if it disrupted propaganda delivery, or Anna Pacher denouncing her own husband.
And Franco's role in stopping this.
Carr says Franco warned other generals about the communist plan to overthrow the republic, but was ignored. The murder of a politician named Chavez Sotelo on July 13, 1936, was the final straw, prompting Franco's proclamation on July 21st, framing the fight as between Russia and Spain. #hashtag the ultimate goal and Carr's call to action.
Okay, so Carr paints this picture of an incredibly cynical, ruthless, long-term plan. What does he say is the ultimate goal of this whole conspiracy, and what does he think people should do about it?
The ultimate goal, Carr asserts, is nothing less than ultimate undisputed control of the wealth, natural resources, and manpower of the entire world.
To create what kind of world?
To turn it into their conception of a totalitarian, godless dictatorship. He claims they believe they're so superior in mental ability that they can manage the world better than God's plan allows. The ultimate aim: to obliterate from the minds of all human beings all knowledge of God and of his commandments.
Does he offer proof of this godless aim?
He points to the attempted deification of Stalin as evidence of this goal, replacing God with the dictator.
Does he predict how this might unfold further? Future wars?
He does. He cites a speech supposedly given by a Rabbi Emanuel Rabinovich in Budapest on January 12, 1952. This is from Carr's source material, remember.
Okay, what did Rabinovich allegedly predict?
Several shocking things. First, forcing World War III within 5 years of 1952.
How?
By inflaming the lagging militaristic spirit of the Americans, specifically using anti-Semitism. This involved spreading reports of anti-Semitic acts in Russia and even staging outbreaks in U.S. cities while funding anti-Semitic groups in America to make them louder.
The goal of that being?
To expose reactionary sectors in the U.S. and unite the country into an anti-Russian unit ready for war.
What else did this alleged speech predict?
After WWRI, no more religions. Except Judaism, which would be kept as a mark of our hereditary ruling caste, with strict racial laws against intermarriage.
Anything else?
A claim that we have turned all of the inventions of the white man into weapons against him. His printing presses, radios, heavy industry, all used to arm Asia and Africa against him.
How did Carr predict WWII itself would be executed?
He foresaw an international general strike paralyzing capitalist countries. Then, communist planes bombing industrial centers, possibly using nerve gas to kill populations and force quick surrender, Soviet forces occupying northern Canada, blockading Britain, and a communist fifth column inside countries liquidating people on blacklists.
It's a truly terrifying vision he presents. So, faced with this stark picture, what's Carr's message to you, the listener? What action does he call for?
He's very direct. He says, immediate action is needed. There is no time to lose to save future generations. His book, Pawns in the Game, is intended to supply this need to get the truth out.
What specific actions does he recommend?
He outlines quite a few. First, monetary reforms. Use constitutional means to take wealth and power away from the leaders of these atheistic, materialistic groups who supposedly usurped it. And usury, make them repay war loans to national treasuries. This, he thinks, would restore democracy.
Second,
monetary controls. People must insist that issuing and controlling money goes back to the elected government run by qualified, ethical people.
Third,
punitive action. Heavy penalties for corruption and graft, because that's how agents subvert people. Outlaw subversive organizations. Punish members, maybe with manual labor, until their negative attitude changes.
Fourth,
diplomatic negotiations. Ban all secret negotiations. If government is of the people, by the people, for the people, the public has a right to know everything. A Christian crusade. He urges Christian laypeople of all denominations to unite in God's name and bigotry and expose how these ideologies use people as pawns. This, he hopes, would cause reflection and lead to religious revival. He suggests the slogan, the cross and the flag.
Sixth,
the United Nations. Oppose any move towards world government, no matter how it's disguised.
Seventh,
illegal traffic and trade. Clean up the underworlds. Arrest criminals regardless of connections. Support honest police. Demand underworlds be cleaned up, not just scattered.
eighth,
brotherly love. Since God provides enough for all, devise an equitable distribution of the necessities of life so some aren't rich while others starve. Abolish fear and uncertainty.
Nice.
Military preparedness. He calls this absolutely necessary as long as these threats exist. Citizens must be ready to defend their country from internal and external aggressors. As long as some freedom remains, there's hope.
And finally,
Action. He stresses again, there is no time to lose. But he ends on a note of hope, saying the task isn't impossible because the core of this evil is centered in maybe just 300 masterminds. He urges immediate action with faith in God to determine humanity's future and overthrow these forces. #outro.
wow, what a journey through a really intense, incredibly far-reaching set of claims. We've just explored William Guy Carr's Pawns in the Game, a text asserting this meticulously planned, centuries-long conspiracy driving world events towards total domination.
Yeah, we've laid out Carr's specific claims about historical figures, major events from the English Civil War right through the World Wars, and the methods he alleges they use: financial manipulation, infiltration, psychological warfare, orchestrated terror.
The level of detail in his argument is pretty remarkable, isn't it? Proposing these connections across centuries, across different ideologies.
It really is. He weaves this continuous thread through history, always pointing back to what he asserts are the same underlying forces with the same ultimate goal.
So this deep dive, as always, has been about understanding the narrative inside the source material you brought us. Carr's work is definitely a profound call for awareness, urging readers to see what he presents as the hidden truth behind global conflict and power.
It certainly compels you to look at history differently. Whether you agree with his conclusions or not, it suggests a hidden layer beneath the surface of events.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a thorough understanding of William Guy Carr's assertions. Our goal, as ever, is just to present the material from the source for your consideration. It's up to you to draw your own conclusions based only on the text we've explored today.
So the question we leave you with maybe is this: what hidden forces, if any, do you observe shaping our world today? And how might they connect or diverge from the patterns Carr laid out?
Keep asking questions, keep digging, and keep learning.